Hey, this is Dr. Drew, and today I want to talk to you about the truth about hair loss. Your hair is actually an extension of your overall health, and if you're prematurely losing your hair or it's going gray, it's a sign that you need to change your lifestyle and diet. Hair loss is actually a very complex issue. There's many systems at play, and we're going to go through them one by one here. But it's been wrongfully reduced down to just one problem, especially for men: DHT. And there are many medications that are used in order to block DHT. And for those of you that don't know, this is a type of testosterone that can be linked to hair loss. But what happens when you use aggressive drugs in order to treat hair loss is there's a lot of side effects. So you run the risk of potentially damaging your endocrine system, and you're going to really disrupt your sex hormone levels. So we want to actually look at hair a little bit differently. The best way to think about hair is think about it like a mini organ. Many organs in the body, they all require certain vitamins, minerals, and nutrients to function at a high level. And your hair is really no different. It's kind of like a metabolic luxury of sorts. And what I mean by that is if there is damage to your mitochondria, if there is insufficiency of nutrients, if your body's in a high amount of stress, it's going to shunt energy and nutrients to the vital organs. And guess what? The hair can get left behind. And then what can happen is you can have premature balding, premature graying, bald patches in general, and those thick wavy locks that you long for are slowly going to drift away. So we want to go through this and talk about what really causes hair loss. And I can tell you for starters, it's not a deficiency of a medication. So one of the first ones we want to talk about with hair loss is thyroid issues. I've done full videos on the thyroid, so if you want more details on that, click the link that we'll put in the description below. But the thyroid regulates metabolism and growth system-wide, and it communicates directly with the hair follicles, tells them to grow, shuttles energy and nutrition to the area so that you can boast thick, wavy locks. So when people present to my office and say, hey doc, my hair's thinning, my ponytail's not as thick as it used to be, or men start to have balding and receding hairlines, right away I'm thinking, what is their thyroid doing? So this is one of the most important things that we test on blood, and it needs to be done with a full thyroid panel, okay? So not just TSH, you need a T3, a T4, and thyroid antibodies. If anything is going on there, it needs to be corrected because the thyroid touches a lot of systems, and the growth of your hair depends on a high functioning thyroid gland. What happens with most people with their thyroid is it's completely disrupted by either stress, lack of iodine, poor intake of protein, not enough zinc and selenium, and etc. So we need to sort of peel back the curtain and see what is happening with the thyroid gland. Another big one is stress and adrenal activation. So many things happen when we're in a high state of stress. So if you look at the fight or flight response, your body's going to conserve energy, get it to the vital organs, and it's going to shunt it away from areas that are less needed. And the hair is absolutely one of them, because your body is going to send it to your heart, your lungs, kidney, liver. It's not going to be pumping it to the hair follicle. So over time, this becomes nutrient depleted. The thing with stress is, and I always like to say, as long as you're alive on this earth, stress is going to be coming at you whether you like it or not. There's simply no way to have a zero stress life. In fact, it's not a good thing either, because a certain amount of stress is beneficial, right? It encourages us to do stuff. It's very motivating. And then during the good times, it feels a lot better. If there were no kind of ups and downs or ebbs and flows, life wouldn't have the same feeling that we long for. So you always have to remember, stress is coming at you whether you like it or not, but it's how do you deal with it? How do you manage it? Because what happens in a chronically stressed state is, again, you get a shunting of nutrients away from the hair, and it really suppresses your thyroid function. There's many ways to blow off stress. We talk about adrenal herbs quite often for this. So like rhodiola, ashwagandha, certain ginsengs can be really good to stabilize cortisol levels, because you don't want this crazy spike and crash of cortisol. That's what really drives stress in our system, and then you just feel like crap after. A lot of people screw up sleep, and they're not getting 7 or more hours each night, so then their cortisol starts to climb. Maybe it's high at night, which then makes it really hard to fall asleep. So you see all kinds of different flips and twists of the curve, but either way, we know they're not handling stress very well. So regular exercise to blow off cortisol is important. I prefer that done first thing in the morning. Stabilizing blood sugar is also critical, because your cortisol system helps regulate your blood sugar levels. So what that means is if you've gone long hours between meals, it sets off a stress in your system because your blood sugar starts to drop. Out comes cortisol to bring the glucose levels back up, because cortisol is a glucocorticoid. If you're not eating regular meals with steady protein, regular exercise to blow off stress, proper sleep to manage your circadian rhythms, it's going to be a lot more stress on your adrenal system. And then you have to deal with work, family, relationship stress on top of all that, which, as you can see, can really start to build up and cause problems. And one of the main areas it'll hit the top of your head. Look into your adrenal and stress system, because I can tell you, when you go to most doctors, they're not going to bring this up when it comes to hair loss. They'll simply say it's genetic and there's really not much you can do about it. It's just the card you were dealt. But I think that's a really poor way to practice medicine, because we need to empower people and educate them and let them know never to give up. And if something's important to them, which health should be, that there's many things you can do and look into. Okay, you're a victim of your habits, not your genes. So it's very important to remember. The next big one for hair loss is estrogen. What happens with this is it is created from testosterone. So there's a hormone in your system that gets released. It's called aromatase, and it'll convert testosterone into estrogen. On top of disrupting your hair growth and hair follicles, it can lead to decreases in muscle mass, decreases in strength. You'll have more body fat deposition, and sometimes you can develop man boobs. So it just causes all kinds of hormonal disruption if too much of it is getting released. Now, you need a little bit of estrogen as a guy, the same way women need a little bit of testosterone, but too much is a problem. And aromatase activity comes from many things: poor diet, poor blood sugar control, excess body fat is going to pump out aromatase like crazy. So we need to get that enzyme under control. And in our society, it's completely out of control. And what's happening is that hard-earned, hard to generate testosterone is getting lost to estrogen. Anyone that's using TRT or testosterone replacement therapy is at risk from generating too much estrogen, because their body has so much on board. And if aromatase goes up in order to shunt some to estrogen, you're going to throw everything way out of whack. In scenarios like this, we need to get metabolically under control and not just rely on medications in order to block estrogen, because that is bad news long term. Seed oils and diet. So this is a really big one when it comes to hair growth. So seed oils are otherwise known as industrial seed oils, basically omega-6 inflammatory oils. Not only are they terrible for the cardiac system, they're really bad for your health and the health of your hair in general. These are seed oils known as corn, soy, canola, sunflower, safflower, all these man-made vegetable oils, and they claim to be healthy and heart healthy, but they're quite the exact opposite. Because in order for you to normally, in general circumstances, ingest a lot of these oils, you'd have to eat tons of the crop, and there's just simply no way to do it. But because we have machines and refineries and huge warehouses that pump these oils out at a rapid rate, we're getting introduced to way more of it than our bodies could ever handle. So what's happening is we're getting a huge omega-6 to omega-3 ratio imbalance, which generates tons of inflammation in our body, specifically cardiac inflammation. And so you should be using none of those oils. The main ones you want to cook with: coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil, and a little bit of butter and a little bit of ghee. Occasionally people will use animal fat or lard, but that's it. Those are the most stable at high heat. They're way less likely to cause any problems in your system, and they're just naturally occurring. High amounts of seed oils are bad news. It completely remodels the mitochondrial membrane. And if you remember earlier, I was talking about mitochondria are what generate energy and give it to all the cells of your body. So if you have mitochondrial damage from excessive inflammation due to these seed oils, the health of your hair is going to be at stake, okay? Nutrient deficiencies are a huge one, okay? If you look at the hair and what it's made up of, it's very easy to just kind of break it down and call it, it's made of this, it's made of this, it's made of this. Am I getting enough of those things? Some big things it's made up of that it needs lots of: zinc, selenium, silica. If you're deficient in those, again, you don't have the right raw materials to build the hair. Vitamin A and vitamin D, critical for hair loss. So I like to do micronutrient testing to kind of figure out, okay, where are the gaps? Are we getting enough fat soluble vitamins? Do we need these micronutrients that I just mentioned? So if you're not testing and monitoring your vitamin D, around 5,000 international units a day of D3 with K2 is a good sort of baseline to start with. Vitamin A, because you remember the fat soluble vitamins can build up in your system if you're not careful. You got to make sure that you don't overdo it. So we're talking around 10 to 20,000 IUs a day of vitamin A is generally pretty safe. Sometimes we'll mega dose it for a few days and taper back. But if you're going to do high doses, it's good to test, track, and monitor it with a physician. And then protein is super important. Collagen is essentially what your hair is made up of. So hair, skin, and nails, just think collagen. And that is an amino acid sequence. It's a tripeptide, right? So it's proline, hydroxyproline, glycine. And so these amino acids come together and make the triple helix that is collagen. So if you're not eating high quality proteins, animal flesh, and getting enough, bone broth, that's where a collagen supplement can be really handy for cases like this. So when people have hair issues, I'm like, how's the protein? And so adding a scoop a day of easily digestible collagen to whether it's your post-workout shake, maybe a smoothie, or just mix with water or coffee, it's fairly tasteless. Awesome way to get more collagen into your system. And now probably one of the most important ones when it comes to hair loss is iron deficiency. So the marker we like to use to track iron levels is the storage form, which is ferritin. Yes, you can track it with hemoglobin and transferrin and iron in the serum, but ferritin levels are important because the range is big. You've heard me talk about this before, 15 to 247, and you can be caught anywhere in there. What happens though is if it's 50 or less, that can contribute to hair loss. And so it's really easy to be 30 or 40. I see it every day in clinic. Many of my female patients are well under 50, and guess one of their main complaints is hair loss, hair thinning, ponytail's not as thick as it used to be. So you gotta get the iron levels up. Now, if you're 30 or less and you've struggled with iron deficiency for years and your hair is falling out, you might qualify for an iron infusion. What this is a series of drips where it actually increases your ferritin by around 100 points in as little as a month or two, because with oral dosing with iron, it can cause gut issues, constipation, and consistency of intake is usually not there. Plus, even if you're really consistent, it can take several months to increase your iron levels. So instead of wasting time with that, if it's a chronic case, the iron infusions might be the way to go. A lot of people are told their iron levels are good. They're sitting at 20, they're sitting at 30, they're sitting at 40. It's not good enough, because what usually accompanies that as well is probably fatigue and low energy, and then dysfunctional thyroid. So lots of issues come from low iron. It's one of the most common deficiencies in the world. So you're only going to increase it with high quality red meat 3-4 times a week, an iron supplement that you can handle, potentially some organ meats or desiccated liver capsules, which is basically just liver that's powderized and added to a capsule. So any of that could be a really good strategy. But you also have to remember, if you have poor gut absorption, celiac disease, Crohn's, IBS, SIBO, any of that could be impacting or preventing you from absorbing iron. So that's where you really got to kind of figure out, are we getting enough? Are we absorbing it? Are we having too much blood loss each month with the monthly cycle for the females? So lots of things to consider here with iron. I could do a whole video on iron, but generally speaking, a major driver of hair loss. Should touch a little bit on Rogaine, popular medication that's prescribed to males, and people fall into usually one of two categories. They're either a responder or a non-responder. A responder is someone who starts using Rogaine and they get some decent relief, right? The hair stops falling out and thinning, maybe even it starts to thicken up again and grow back, and that's great. There's also a subset of people that are called non-responders, where they apply it to the scalp and it just doesn't seem to change much. What can be a big game changer here is a treatment called microneedling. Now what it is a small little pen. It's usually about the shape of this, slightly bigger, and it has tiny little needles on the end of it. It's sort of like a mini jackhammer that goes across the hair. And with microneedling, you can actually penetrate through the scalp, usually around 1 to 1.5 millimeters. And that actually weekly paired with Rogaine can take a non-responder and turn them into a responder. What it does is it just basically increases metabolic rate and activity at the hair follicle level. We've even seen improvements with hair loss and hair growth just by doing microneedling every week or so. You don't want to do it any sooner than that, because it does at 1.5 millimeters cause a little bit of blood loss and pretty much decent reddening of the scalp. So you're not going to want to do that too often, and if you still have to go in public and see people, because it's going to flare the area up for about a day or two. People will use microneedling on their face as well to tighten things up, get rid of wrinkles, induce collagen synthesis and that sort of stuff. So very cool treatment that's hit the scene as of the last maybe 5 or 10 years. At my clinic, we'll do microneedling, and then you can do like a PRP injection or smear across the area, which again is another option for hair loss, where you take blood out of the arm, you have whole blood, you spin it down into platelets, and then you inject the platelet-rich plasma all through the scalp to induce hair growth and thickening. Now, the important thing with these treatments is it's got to be done sooner rather than later, because if you just have a full-on shiny bald head, it's hard to boast more hair growth and increased thickness because there's not much to go off of. But if it starts to thin and there's still a lot of follicles around that area, but you're just seeing more of the scalp, that's when microneedling and Rogaine combinations, maybe microneedling with PRP, can really come in handy. So, if you're struggling with hair loss and you haven't been able to figure this out, and you've just been told it is genetic and it's hereditary and there's nothing you can do about it, think again. You need someone to take you through all of those potential causes that I talked about. Start looking into some of these alternative treatments, and never give up on your quest to have really beautiful, thick, wavy hair. If you have questions, drop a comment below. If you need my help or want to know more, just send me a message and I'd be happy to help. And as always, thank you for watching.